It's Monday, and you know what that means. Jersey First TV proudly brings to you the latest edition of Real Talk. And certainly, I am New Jersey's premier award winning journalist, Top 50 Latino, as voted on by the Latino Spirit Online magazine, along with the United States Latino Affairs Initiative. And certainly, I will continue to be the weapon of mass disruption in Garden State media because, ladies and gentlemen, my level of honesty, now more than ever, is truly necessary in this era of journalistic deception. Folks, it's me, Fernando Uribe. Once again, happy Monday. Happy March to all of you. Again, great weather here. We changed the clock back, this Sunday. Excuse me, we set it forward this Sunday, so spring is right around the corner. We'll be seeing a sunset at 8 o'clock. Again, folks, all the good things that remind us that spring and summer are imminent. And I'll tell you right now, I'm looking forward to day drinking right across the pier looking at Manhattan. And I'm sure many of you are interested about warmer weather as well. And folks, again, hey, thank you for joining us here from wherever and however you may be doing so right now on Facebook Live via StreamYard, also on the Jersey Verse YouTube page, as well as on LinkedIn and also on our other social media platforms. Speaking of which, folks, I can't say enough how grateful I am to all of you that continue to tune in every single week. And of course, those of you that like us on Facebook, of course, make sure you like Real Talk with Fernando Uribe, as well as Jersey First TV. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, as also along with Jersey First. And of course, I know everybody watches YouTube one way, shape, or form. Click that subscribe button, and you'll be automatically notified of all the great content brought to you every single week by Jersey First TV. And of course, whether you get your podcasts on Spotify or SoundCloud, guess what? Download Jersey First. And whether you're visiting your in-laws, doing errands, going for a morning run, walking the dog, whatever it is you're doing, folks, you have your smartphone with you. You probably have your tablet with you. Download Jersey First and check out all the great programming brought to you by Jersey First TV. And I can't say enough how proud I am to be on the dream team of Garden State Media. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed Jersey First TV, always educating and advocating for the residents of this great state here. Folks, brand new episodes of The Nader Narrative, hosted by the amazing Elizabeth Nader, premiere every Thursday on all of our platforms. And of course, brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap, hosted by AJ Malillo and Stephen Rombolo, also premiere on Thursdays. And of course, every Monday, you check your local listings live. Every Monday night, you can check out Real Talk with Fernando Uribe right here via Jersey First TV. Folks, a lot to cover in this program. I got great guests coming up in a moment. Definitely want to stick around for that. You also want to stick around for final thoughts. I have a lot to say, folks, about the importance, as I do every single week, about standing up to Jewish hate on this program. Hey, listen, there's no shortage of examples about what's going on in academia, in our media institutions, activism, folks. It's a lot of hatred out there against the Jewish community. Here on Jersey First TV, folks, we're proud to stand up to Jewish hate each and every day. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to thank you all for a tremendous February. Yes, folks, over 18, actually, it's approaching 19,000 now. In terms of organic traffic here on the program, I can't say enough about how thankful I am to all of you. I'm deeply humbled, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not the most humble guy around, but I'm humbled by your support and your ongoing viewership here every single week, whether you're watching live here on Monday nights or sharing the replays on your social media. Without, again, all of you at home, family, friends, frenemies, colleagues, whoever, haters, it doesn't matter, ladies and gentlemen. You're all tuning in for a reason, and I know you'll continue to do so. And again, without your support, that number behind me would not be possible. So thank you again for all that. We'll talk a little bit more about traffic. I'll brag a little bit about it. Why not? But we'll talk about that a little bit more, folks. But also, especially during Final Thoughts, I definitely have a lot to say about today's Supreme Court decision about keeping the 45th president on the ballot. And again, folks, for everyone that we want to talk about, democracy is in danger. Well, democracy is in danger if you don't allow people to be on a ballot. So you can't you can't pick and choose when you like democracy, folks, and when you like the three branches of government and checks and balances. I'll talk more about that during Final Thoughts, of course, and why today's ruling, by the way, a unanimous ruling, by the way, 9-0, is really significant during this election season. And also, of course, folks, I do want to wish everyone a very happy Women's History Month. I know International Women's Day is coming up soon. Here in this program, we have a little fun here, of course. So I do want to send a shout out to all the ladies there, and especially in media here in New Jersey, folks. Why not give a shout out to one of the women in New Jersey media, of course, Jay Lassiter and others. I like to, sort of have a little fun at their expense, and we'll do that a little bit later. But folks, again, let's get serious here. It's time to talk about issues. It's time to talk about media, and it's time to talk about issues that really, really matter in academia. And folks, joining us live here this evening, he's a big fan of the show, and he teaches at my alma mater, Rutgers University in New Brunswick, at the School of Communication and Information. Again, you can check out more about this great program if you're looking to enroll, maybe scouting some programs for your children. Again, as they're seniors in high school, you can go to www.comminfo, that's COMM, info.rutgers.edu. He's a professor of media there at Rutgers University. Folks, he's a big fan of the show and a good friend of mine. He's the distinguished Dr. John Pavlik, joins us here on Real Talk. Professor, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. It's a great pleasure and an honor.
I appreciate it, John. John, the honor is mine. And again, folks, if you're just tuning in right now, click that share button, and just sharing is caring here on Jersey First TV. John, again, I had the privilege of interviewing you last year, and I know we talked a lot about sort of the evolution of media, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I think for my audience that maybe is not familiar with you, man, you have quite a legacy. You have quite, I think, sort of an enriched tradition within media, and it's been a big part of your life, I think, for as long as you can remember. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. My grandfather was in the newspaper business. I found an old census document from the 1930, I think, and he listed his employment as a newspaper printer. But wow. The term printer back then was not the same as we think of it as today. It was really much more like being a publisher. And then my father had an electronics business, and my mother was a teacher. And you put all that together, and you got somebody who's a professor about journalism, media, and especially technology. That's my specialty, is the impact of new technology on media and society.
And we'll definitely talk about the impact of technology because, listen, again, I mean, I think back, John, to how much I love reading newspapers. I grew up reading newspapers. My dad instilled that in me at a very young age about, improving your vocabulary, reading comprehension, all the good things about reading papers. And I'm still a big fan of sort of picking up the paper. I'm sort of an old school guy. I like to read the paper. I read the sports first, then I read the editorials. I read the news. But, by and large, like everybody else, I mean, you wake up, I look at my iPad every morning during breakfast, and I'll check out my digital subscriptions to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I try to pick up what's going on. But I got to tell you, man, I mean, those days of reading a newspaper, I mean, it was enjoyable having a cup of coffee, kind of flipping through the paper, even on the weekends. I mean, again, I grew up during a time when, I'm not sure what part of New Jersey you live in, but I mean, where I live in Hudson County, I mean, going out Sundays to pick up the Bergen Record or, the Sunday Star Ledger. I mean, we're talking about like, it was as thick as my dissertation. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure you can relate to that. But I mean, those days are long gone, man. I mean, the idea of picking up a paper and sitting there spending a Sunday going through, the Sunday magazine, as they say, going through editorials, going through comics. I mean, I was a big comic fan. I still am. I mean, those days are so passé, man. Again, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, John, but it really saddens me because I grew up reading newspapers, as I'm sure you did too.
Well, I was even a paper carrier. That was my first job when I was 12 years old. I used to deliver the paper. I grew up in Wisconsin, so it was a Wisconsin paper. It was the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. But I used to enjoy reading the paper when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it. And I still enjoy reading the journalism that's produced by newspaper companies or news companies. But I am sometimes nostalgic for those days when you had a nice printed product and it was thick and you could share sections with the other members of your household, things like that. Yeah. But I mean, on the other hand, today we have the ability on a portable device like a smartphone or a tablet. You have the world at your fingertips. So you can get the news and you can get it in multimedia form. So you can get it in text or audio or video or in immersive form. But you can also go around the world and get news that when you were, in the print days, very hard to reach out to international news sources very easily. You could go to the library and you could find newspapers, but they were probably last week's newspaper, that sort of thing. So it was, it's a changing situation, but I think it's more than a nostalgic issue for me. It's really the rise of what are called news deserts. So there's a lot of research now that shows that hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000 communities in the U.S. no longer have professionally produced local journalism. And that's a real loss because our communities depend on quality information. And journalism has historically been one of the best sources of quality information. Not a guarantee. There's always going to be errors. There's always going to be bias. But, it was one of the most reliable sources that we had. And that's, for many communities, that's gone away.
It certainly has, though, John. And again, you bring up that example. And again, I'll just mention here in Hudson County. I mean, one of the, I guess, iconic news sources for many, many years tangibly was the Hudson Reporter. Obviously the many journalists that we've seen sort of, branch out statewide started in Hudson County, and they were writing for the Hudson Reporter. That has gone out of circulation. The Jersey Journal, again, another sort of local iconic newspaper, has gone down in circulation, obviously in ads. And, we'll get to advertising and the dollars that sort of drive, that we used to drive these papers. But at the end of the day, like, you're absolutely correct. I mean, at the local level now, for example, here in Hudson County, I look at digital news sites. I look at my good friend, John Hines. He's the editor of the Hudson County View, which generates really good organic traffic. We also have the Tap Into web, news sites that have sort of popped up all over New Jersey, as well as the Patches. And I mean, again, these are digital news sites, and they hire reporters, right? It's sort of like, it makes you think about, hey, when you graduate from undergrad, whether it was a journalism degree or not, I mean, you kind of cut your teeth in the business by working at the local paper. I mean, now that's been replaced by, hey, if I can go write for the local Tap Into in Parsippany, in Summit, all the way down in Cape May County, for example, or the local Patches. I mean, that, I think, to your point about evolution, I think that has now become the next step in the way I think journalists pursue employment, I would say, right?
It is. And it's an opportunity for innovation to try to, use new approaches to how we can gather the news and how we can distribute it. So I think that, that's important. But unfortunately, the number of people working in the news industry is much smaller than it was, say, 30 years ago. So that diminishment of the workforce. But there is opportunity for what we might call the citizen reporter. So more and more citizens are out there, with their smartphone or with some other means of doing some local reporting. It's not maybe it's the same as professional journalism, but it does supplement. And sometimes some of the most important video that we see or photos come from citizen reporters on maybe there's a tragedy, a fire, something, happening, and a citizen happens to be there with their phone. They can capture video of it. So there is that as well. So it's not a complete loss of local reporting in many communities because there's still, like you say, these online sources that have emerged, but many of them don't have a large full-time staff. Maybe there's one or two full-time, and then maybe a bunch of kind of like stringers or freelancers or however you want to define it, who work part-time. So it's not a complete replacement for the old model of newspapers that had tens or dozens of journalists working on gathering the news and reporting it, editing it, making sure to fact check it, all of that. So it's not the same, but it's not a complete loss of local news and information.
John, would you say that? I mean, I'm sure this issue has resonated forever. It's not just a new thing, but advertising. I think the way that a lot of newspapers would generate revenues, right, were based on advertising, right? And I think that that's sort of as translated now into the digital scope, again, along the local level, like the Tap Intos, the Patches, like those local news sites, in addition to other news sites that have sort of popped up in New Jersey, for example. Again, I think at the end of the day, it's dollars and cents, right? It's almost like, well, you need advertising, you need to hire people. A lot of people aren't doing this for fun. I mean, it's not a hobby. I think if you really want to cover the news, I mean, case in point, for example, a good friend of mine, Charlie Crowderville, not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's the editor of New Brunswick Today, a very reputable news site in New Brunswick. He's been running it for a few years. I mean, Charlie's a friend of mine. I mean, we don't agree on anything politically whatsoever, but I respect what he's doing. Again, he's sort of like, I wouldn't say citizen journalism, but I would say, a guy who started off and said, hey, there really isn't any news site that covers one of New Jersey's largest cities, New Brunswick, New Jersey, and certainly, the nearby townships in Middlesex County. These, again, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but the point is that, those type of projects require time and money. And, if you're not advertising, if you're not really securing a good advertiser, whether it's a local bank, whether it's municipalities, whether it's, Robert Wood Johnson, for God's sakes, or Wells Fargo, if you're not getting that sort of funding, for example, that NJ Spotlight News gets, where, they're getting the NJEA, which I think is a conflict of interest, but don't even get me started on that. The point is, like, these are big dollar advertisers that these bigger news sites benefit from. But at the local level, that's not the case. And I think I would argue that's probably the biggest obstacle for them to A, hire, and B, have sort of a functional staff. Is that fair to say?
I think that's right. And what's happened is a lot of the advertising revenue has gone into digital platforms and social media platforms, and then a few of the larger news sites, but it doesn't replace what used to be the mainstay, the local retail advertisers, the local classified advertisers who used to support the local journalism. And so you had a model where in as recently as maybe the 1980s, 1990s, newspapers, 70% of the revenue came from advertising in one form or another. Sure. And now that is, shrunk to certainly less than half for many. And what they had to try to replace it with are different kinds of models, like digital subscribers or memberships. If some news media have converted to nonprofit status, and so they have membership models, but many of those, they don't generate a lot of revenue. And so it's tough to support a news operation with professional journalists, because you say they don't, sure, they care about the news, but they can't afford to work full time for virtually nothing. And they need to support their life, their family, whatever. So that's a great challenge for journalism today in many local communities, is how to support it when there's simply not much revenue. It's an expensive business, creating quality original content that you check for accuracy and you put in a form that is something that people will spend their time with. That's really tough to do. And many people don't appreciate how hard it is to get the facts straight. Even if you're just reporting a little, a little meeting, getting the names spelled correctly, getting the titles of the people who are involved accurate, getting what they said to be accurate. Those are all really challenging. And then to try to distill it so that you get sort of like the lead out of that, it's very challenging, and you need experienced journalists to do it well. And so, it's a problem for a society, because it's the fourth estate. When you think of journalism.
Oh, okay. I think we lost John there. Don't know what happened. Let's get John back on here. Hopefully he'll log back in again. All right, here we go. All right, John. All right.
Something technically happened. I don't know what, but I was just saying how journalism is the fourth estate. It's sort of like the fourth branch of government. You mentioned earlier the other three, the judicial, the legislative, and the executive. Well, journalism acts as the fourth branch, the fourth estate, kind of the informal branch, but it's a check on the other three. And when we lose that vibrant, robust institution, if it starts to become less of a force, then we lose one of the important checks and balances in our system of democratic society. So even if you don't necessarily agree with everything you see in the news or hear or read, it's still very important in acting as a vehicle for us to learn. So the Supreme Court makes a big decision today and says Donald Trump can't be taken off the ballot in the primary in Colorado. Where do most people hear about that? They hear about it in the news in some fashion, whether it's news from a news site or news over social media or on this show, in some form. Journalism is often an important part of that process, because we can't be everywhere. People can't be everywhere all the time to hear everything firsthand. So we rely on journalists to act as our sense makers. And that's a vital function. And, if we lose that, we really suffer as a society.
I'm with you, John. I mean, again, this isn't North Korea. It's not Cuba. It's not China. It's not Russia. Again, free press is, there's a reason why, it's in the document. It's in the bill. It's the very first amendment. It's right in there with freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom to exercise religion and freedom of assembly. Like, the founders understood. And again, I don't want to, this is the history professor in me coming out, but again, I cannot speak highly enough about how intelligent the founders were and how they prioritized and knew that in the very first amendment, the importance of a free press and how that would, let's be honest, 200 something years later, it is still one of the cornerstones, as you mentioned, about American democracy. And it's certainly one that once that dies, again, it's something that, you look at sort of like a degradation of civility, right? The civilized society, to be able to have a working press that, and again, listen, you and I might differ on where the press leans. I have my own theory, you might have yours, but the point is a free press is a necessary press. And I think people don't understand that really. I think when it comes to understanding how the framers looked at it as such a vital component, right, in sort of the infancy of the republic, as they say. Folks, it's 7:20 here on the East Coast. My guest tonight, he is a distinguished professor of media at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. My good friend, Dr. John Pavlik, joins us here on Real Talk. John, let's move on to some technology talk. I really want to pick your brain here. I got to tell you, man, as someone who I remember, going to New Brunswick, and going to my undergraduate days and then going to grad school at Rutgers in Newark, I remember how, mobile technology has changed dramatically. One of the biggest challenges that, with students I've had is that I just don't like, and I get it that, campuses are Wi-Fi now and that every classroom has Wi-Fi capabilities and students feel the need to bring their MacBooks or their Chromebooks to take notes and to do whatever during class. John, I've never been a fan of that, man. I'm a fan of handwritten notes. Data will tell you that you retain a lot more information that way. It's a lot more constructive. For God's sakes, you get to practice your handwriting, which I think has become a lost art almost, right? But the point is that I think that whether it's our college campuses, or in general, like we become such a smartphone, mobile technology, almost dependent society here in the United States, where I've told my students, like, listen, unless there's a specific need or, that you require, that the Office of Student Life tells me, hey, this student needs mobile technology because of such and such. I'm trying to be a little PC here. That's usually not my way on the show, but some either learning disability or some difficulty in learning that, okay, they need, they can't take handwritten notes. They have to do it, on a MacBook, for example. I'm not a fan of that. And I think that's dramatically changed the way that academia, I think, has progressed in the last 20, 30 years, though, John, where, again, undergrad for me in New Brunswick, I went to the dollar store, got a bunch of like legal pads, tons of pencils or the click pencils, whatever, a big eraser, and I just took notes. That's not the case anymore. And again, you've been in the business longer than I have. What's been the adjustment for you when, you've seen that happen in the classroom?
Well, you're right. I don't see too many students who come in with a notepad and a pen or a pencil anymore. So they pretty much have all converted over to some sort of digital device for, how they keep information and process it. So for me, it's just accepting that the tide has turned and that, it's digital now and the analog technologies are mostly niche, not mainstream. And so I have more or less just accepted that. But I also like to both keep an eye on some of the drawbacks, but also some of the benefits and try to take advantage of the benefits as much as possible and not, lament over what may have been lost, because I know that I'm not going to get to things to go back. That's not going to happen. I don't think. It might. Nobody has the crystal ball that they can see ahead, 20 years and, see that maybe the apocalypse happens and we're all back living with paper and pen again. But that notwithstanding, what I do is I try to engage the students where they are. I was in an interesting session the other day. A guy was a veteran of media talking about meeting the public where it is. You could keep putting out news in some particular way, but if the public isn't there, then you're just shouting into an empty room. So you're really sometimes have to be realistic and go, where are they now? And I saw data the other day that show now that people are in front of the screen over 12 and a half hours a day. So if you figure we're only awake 16 hours a day, let's just say we sleep 8 hours, that leaves us 16 hours. And if, let's say, 1 or 2 hours of that is eating,
yeah,
that only leaves you about 14 hours a day to be doing anything else. And we're now spending almost 13 hours of those 14 in front of a screen.
Of some kind, right? Whether it's your phone or a physical notebook or tablet, right?
Yeah, or it could be a smart TV type device too.
Yeah.
But now we're in front of some sort of digital device almost the entire day, and it's only getting more so because now our cars are increasingly containing digital screens as well. You can't drive down the street in a new car and not have digital displays. Yeah. And then when you add in audio devices, smart speakers, those aren't screen necessarily devices, but it's another way to interact with digital media. So what I've done is I've said, look, this is the world we live in now. It's ubiquitous. How can we make the best of it? Now, we want to make sure we protect privacy. We don't want to have our data misused by big technology companies, but we also want to make sure that we don't have misinformation or disinformation. So that's a big thing that concerns me is if the students are going to be using these digital devices, how can I teach them to be digitally literate, to really know how to check the veracity of something, to make sure they don't see something and think, oh my gosh, really? And then share it with 100 people before they realize it's fake.
Well, which brings me to my next point here. And again, I think for anybody that grew up in the 90s watching the Terminator movies, I think, Sarah Connor and John Connor warned us about artificial intelligence and, Skynet. And I know that obviously that's not happening, but I think there's a very real concern though, John, about what artificial intelligence is going to be doing, I think, to the news. And I think the way that we, consume the news. And again, case in point, I say this all the time. I mean, again, I wake up and I like to sort of look at my tablet. I read the Times, I read the Wall Street Journal in the morning. But a lot of people, I think, and I say, and I really urge people and I warn them against this. It's like relying on social media to get your news, I think, is problematic. Again, to the premise of like, there's so much misinformation out there, disinformation. And I think it really puts us in a quandary though, John, because, more and more people that I talk to, whether it's students, whether it's colleagues in the field, whoever will say to me, hey, I wake up, I read Twitter, or I read Facebook, or I read Instagram, or I read Telegram or Twitch or whatever. And I'm looking at news sites, I'm looking at articles, I'm clicking on it, it's clickbait. You read the headline, oh, that gets my attention. Oh, I'm reading it. Again, I do my due diligence, as I know you do. Not everyone's going to read a long article. You read a couple paragraphs. Oh, I got what I needed. No, that's not the case. And I think that's becoming a serious problem, though, John. And again, in an election year like 2024, where it's as important as ever to understand the issues and understand candidates and understand the times we're living in. Again, man, I'm with you. I'm all about evolution, understanding and embracing technology, but it's also created its fair share of problems too, I would say.
Absolutely. And the rise of artificial intelligence, especially what people are now familiar with the phrase generative AI or artificial intelligence that can create things. It can be really dangerous because it can create news content that looks authentic, but is actually fake. Or it can create images that look totally real, photographic, but they're not real. and there can be deep fakes, and some of them are really, damaging. And it's happened right in New Jersey, but it's happened on a global scale as well, to Taylor Swift, for example. So, it's a real serious problem. And we have a program at my school. It's called Disinformation Detox. So I and my colleagues are taking this really very seriously. But I also don't want to miss another opportunity for innovation in journalism, because, journalism is not what it once was. And it missed some opportunities for innovation along the way. For example, the rise of online classifieds that wound up taking away a lot of the revenue for news media. Yeah. And I'm hoping that news media don't miss an opportunity to innovate, because there are ways to use AI that can be effective. You have to be thoughtful about it. You have to be ethical about it. And so I think if journalism can, utilize AI as an assistant, as a tool, like somebody would use a spreadsheet, you can misuse it, but you can also use it very effectively as a tool. And I think AI has its same potential. So I think that's going to be the key. Can we find a way to utilize it in journalism and media industries in a way that's both responsible and effective? Then I think we could have a better form of journalism.
I mean, John, it's just not even journalism. I mean, case in point, the Super Bowl just passed a few weeks ago. And, one of the big things about the Super Bowl is watching the commercials. I mean, that's sort of a rite of passage. Not sure if you're a big sports fan like I am. Obviously, I have a Super Bowl party in my house. Love watching the Super Bowl. I'm a big NFL fan. But the point is, for example, people love watching movie trailers. And the very next day, I mean, I'm a big comic book fan. And sure enough, there are people using AI say, hey, Fernando, did you see the trailer for this movie? And then look what's coming out. This is a plot. This was in it. I'm like, wait a second. Where'd you get this from? Oh, I got it from this site. What site? And then just 2 minutes of just basic research, you're like, dude, that's AI generated. That's not real. That actor's not going to be in that movie. That's not the plot. And you're sharing this, and you're it's okay, now you're effing up the algorithm. It's okay, just do a little due diligence here, man. And I just think that, to that point about artificial intelligence, it's not just infiltrating, media. It's infiltrating almost any, I think, tangibly visual component, right, of our lives, Don.
Yes, that's right. And we saw the strike in Hollywood, and the concern that the Hollywood, the big movie companies might try to replace script writers with AI, chatbots, and that's something that is a real concern. And the contract that was signed, puts some limits on what can be done, but that contract's only for, I think, 3 years, and then there'll be a new one. So who knows what the future may bring, or there'll be companies that aren't bound by those laws that may be outside the the parameters. So they may utilize AI to do movie creation as well, and some of it may be for disinformation purposes. So you don't know that it's necessarily just for entertainment. It might also be for purposes of political manipulation, to try to mislead voters. And it could be foreign entities who are creating these videos and then injecting them into the social media stream, and people may be misled by it or deceived. And if they're not really good critical thinkers, and this all goes back to New Jersey, 1938. One of my favorite examples, the War of the Worlds broadcast. Many people knew it was fake. It was a radio play, but some listeners didn't know it was a fake. There was just a play, and some people thought that maybe the Earth was really being invaded. So I think we need people to be critical consumers of media, and to always think twice before acting on or sharing content they see.
John, speaking of that, I mean, H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. I mean, listen, great book. I don't think it ever got really redone well in the last 30 years in terms of a movie. I know the series that, obviously I've seen replays of it back in the 60s. I think there was some sometime in the 80s. I know that Steven Spielberg tried to sort of recreate War of the Worlds in 2005. Not really a good job, I thought, but certainly that's a great example of, the hysteria that H.G. Wells and Orson Welles did during that broadcast. I mean, that's crazy, right? That people fell for that. But listen, it's something that can certainly repeat itself. And to your point about AI, who's to say that in the future, we don't change music? We can sort of resuscitate dead artists or dead actors and use them in roles where, again, either their estate or their next of kin might argue, hey, listen, is this, well, it's AI, it's, if you're signing over certain rights to studios and everything, who's to say just, can't recreate lost actors and actresses in films, and again, through AI. And listen, I'm with you. I think it certainly advances technology, but I think it also raises some concerns. John, let me ask you this, because I'm sure that you get this question or have gotten it at some point during your academic career. And, I'm one of the few conservative, journalists in New Jersey, if some people disagree with that term with me, but more on that later. I'm sure you've been asked at some point, though, John, hey, Professor Pavlik, like, why is the sort of the national establishment media, or even the New Jersey establishment media, why is it so like liberal? Like, what gives, John? And like what usually is your answer if you've ever been posed that question?
Well, it's a little bit like asking, why are so many professors liberal? Well, it may be that they are liberal in the sense that they're open to looking at things in a way that considers all sides and focuses on what is the consequences, what are the parameters that are shaping this, rather than going in with a predetermined agenda. So you might, person who's on one side of the fence, progressive or conservative, might look at journalists and say they're too liberal. And there may be some bias and there may be some truth to that. But I think more often than not, most serious journalists try to look at things in an impartial way and use a methodology that allows them to look at things in a way that doesn't predetermine what's the outcome. And that's why, at least in our department, we try to teach, report the facts. And we try to answer, there's 5 main questions. It goes back to the who, what, when, where, and why. And we try to answer those questions in a way that's as impartial as humanly possible. Now, we are human, and you're always going to have your own personal point of view. But when you're doing your journalistic work, you try to lay that point of view aside and try to be as neutral as possible. And on most stories, that works fine. You're reporting on a fire. You're reporting on, an accident. You're reporting on, something that's happened in your community. Where it gets more challenging and more difficult is when it starts going into the political arena, and where, now you're reporting on, say, an issue before the Supreme Court, or, a judicial decision. How do you report that in a way where you keep your own point of view, from not interjecting and shaping what you're reporting? And that's why usually.
But John, I'll let you finish. I'm sorry, but I think that's really the core issue, though, right? It's like, how can we get to that level of reporting when, as you mentioned, reporting the facts? But it's I hate to say that the editorial has almost become not a necessity, but it seems like an editorial almost always gets interjected into it on both sides. Again, I'm consistent. I know conservative media does it. I know liberal media does it. So, I'm consistent here. But it just seems like, how difficult has it become, though, where it's almost like the editorial is almost inevitable?
Well, it happens now sometimes because you can draw more audience, or you might be able to draw certain advertisers. So that's, hard to resist when you're in it as a commercial business. And that's one of the reasons why some news media are looking to become nonprofits, or have become not-for-profit organizations. So they're not worried about, well, what will the advertisers feel if I report on this story or if I report in that way? But I think that one of the tools that journalists have historically used is, when you're reporting a story that has different points of view, try to get somebody from each of those perspectives to provide a comment, to interview those people. So you're reporting on a story that's, say, a current court decision. You don't go in and only talk to people who would be in support of one side or the other. You try to talk to people who would be on both sides and give them an opportunity to provide their viewpoint. So that's one of the tools, one of the techniques of journalism, to try to maintain that by giving some, airtime or some page on the space on the page to the different points of view. Now, it's not perfect because you could choose certain biased words, or you might pick a source on one side that's not exactly the same as the source on the other side. But, that's I think a key part of the methodology is to try to give voice to each side of that and to give them relatively equal weight, and to not, like, when a person provides a comment, you don't roll your eyes, you try to remain neutral when they provide a comment. And so that's part of the methodology of doing good journalism.
I mean, certainly challenging for sure. Folks, it's 7:38 here on the East Coast. We'll be wrapping up shortly here with my guest, a distinguished professor of media at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, my alma mater. Proud of that. Obviously, I'd like to rock the red as much as I can here on Jersey First TV. He's John Pavlik here. Join us on Real Talk. John, I get a lot of grief because I'm not considered a journalist. People look at streaming shows like this where we're having conversations. I'm interviewing people, journalists, candidates, elected officials on the right, on the left, in the middle, whatever. I've interviewed, the president of the New Jersey Socialist Party to the, chair of the New Jersey LGBTQ Democrat caucus. I mean, everybody in between. So I'll talk to anybody. I try to have very, engaging conversations, civilized conversations, no screaming matches or anything like that. But again, because I think I lean conservative, a lot of sort of establishment media people in New Jersey would just say, well, Uribe is he's not really a journalist. He didn't go to journalism school. He has his graduate degrees. He started a podcast. He's interviewing people. That doesn't really make him a journalist. So, I mean, some people take exception when I use that term, but I think that, like anything else, like technology, though, John, I would argue that journalism also has evolved as well. Again, I know, listen, case in point, a good friend of mine is Al Sullivan. He's a longtime journalist in Hudson County. He's written for tons of different news sites. He's been at this for over 40 years, almost a mentor to me. And he told me when I started doing podcasting, he's like, listen, for better or for worse, you're a journalist now. You're talking about the news. You may not be breaking news or reporting on news, but you're interviewing viable people, relevant people. What you're doing is journalism, Fernando. So don't let anyone tell you different. But that's not always the case, though, John. I get some vitriol like, oh, he's not really. He's a commentator, or he's a blowhard, or he's just an opinion journalist. It just seems like there's still some dispute, John, about what a journalist is in 2024. And again, as someone like yourself that teaches media and communication and journalism, what are your thoughts about podcasters like myself or others that are doing opinion journalism now?
I think that it's an issue that is partly based on the fact that we don't require our journalists to be licensed. There are countries in the world where if you're going to call yourself a journalist, you have to be licensed by the government. And to obtain that license, there are certain criteria that have to be met. And we don't have that. In our country, we treat journalists as a profession, or some people would say it's more like a craft, but it's different than, say, the legal profession or the medical profession, where you have to be licensed to call yourself an attorney, or to work as an attorney, or to work as a doctor. And there's good reasons. I mean, you wouldn't want to go in and have it turns out your surgeon never went to medical school and doesn't know how to operate, right? So, there are reasons for that. But for reasons of freedom of speech and press, we don't want to license our journalists, because who's to say the government might deny a license to someone because they don't like what they do. And maybe they don't like it not because of the politics, but they don't like it because they're investigative journalists who might be someone who wants to expose corruption. So that's why we don't license our journalists. And I think that also then means there aren't any hard and fast rules on what can qualify a person to be a journalist. I think that the main thing is that you attempt to report as truthfully as you can. Now, you might have a conservative point of view, and in your case, you acknowledge that you have that point of view. So I don't have a problem with that. You look at editorial pages in newspapers for a couple hundred years, they write editorials. That doesn't mean when they're writing an editorial, they've lost the ability to be a journalist anymore. They're acknowledging that they're taking a point of view. And if you acknowledge the point of view you're taking, but that to you, what you're saying is truthful, you're not deliberately lying in order to make your case. I would say someone who's deliberately lying, that would disqualify them from being a journalist. A journalist, I think the number one duty is to the truth. And if that's what you aspire to, even if it's from a particular point of view, as long as you're aspiring to the truth, whatever, nobody can say, well, what is the truth, right? How does anybody really know what the actual truth is? You try to find facts, double check them, confirm them, go to different sources, you triangulate, you try to build, a truthful story or narrative or set of facts. And as long as that's what you're doing, I think that's journalistic work. If you're deliberately misleading people, that's no longer journalist. Now you become a propagandist, I would say, or you're just trying to build, an audience to make money, but you're not a journalist then if that's not your goal. But if your goal is really to reveal the truth, even if it's from a point of view and you acknowledge the point of view, that still can be journalistic work.
It's a slippery slope, right, John? I mean, I think people sometimes will be like, well, he or she is doing A, B, and C. And again, it comes up, I think, people can have their opinions. And I think certainly, with technology, I mean, again, the ability to just do a show like this where, again, let's just 10 years ago, it would have required me contacting you and say, hey, listen, come to the studio, and you have to leave campus or leave your home. And that's not the case anymore. I mean, obviously, platforms like Zoom and StreamYard have made shows like this possible where we can have a conversation. Obviously, if we have good Wi-Fi, right? Thankfully, we can have this good conversation and it could reach X amount of people pretty expeditiously. And I think that's probably, the one advancement I would say that the internet, certainly social media. So, again, the internet's only been around maybe probably about 30 years now. I mean, it's 2024. I'm kind of thinking around 93, 94.
With the World Wide Web, 30 years. They actually started developing it in the 1970s, but really nobody but a few computer geeks had access.
Sure. And again, 30 years is not a long time. And now obviously we saw the creation of Facebook in 2005, Twitter a few years later. I'm sorry, YouTube that same year, then Twitter, and then Instagram, and then Snapchat, and this and that. I can't even keep track how many social media apps there are. But again, whether it's TikTok now, it's become now this source of information. You can either make videos, not about cooking. I mean, sure you can, but you can now do news stories on TikTok, and that can reach thousands of people within really minutes. And I think that again, to your point about misinformation, disinformation, it almost makes it like we can be a little susceptible, man, to things like that that could be unhealthy. Before I let you go, let me ask you this, though, John. I've been saying this for a while, and certainly we're living in a time of tribalism, almost on steroids, basically. And an election year like this year, I think, is certainly going to bring out a lot of tribalism, whether in news media, whether on our college campuses, in a lot of institutions, our public schools, never mind colleges. I mean, as far down as elementary schools. How do you see any relief on the horizon possibly about how we can get past this tribalism? Because again, it's sort of infiltrating into our media, right? I mean, whether it's hosting town halls on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whatever, local news sites in New Jersey. I mean, can we ever really get away from the tribalism that we're living in? Or is it just here to stay and we have to just find a way to sort of endure it and not let it sort of overwhelm us?
Well, I think it was actually a 1960s media studies scholar, a guy named Marshall McLuhan, who said that television was going to, create the global village and re-tribalize us. So I think we've seen that happen a lot, especially with, as you say, the rise of the internet and social media. But I'm optimistic, and maybe it's because I spend so much time with college students, but they just make me feel good about the future. They're enthusiastic, they're dedicated, and they believe in doing the right thing. Most of my students are all like, when we have discussion groups, the first thing they want to talk about, even if it's not a course about ethics, is they want to talk about what's the ethics of what AI is doing to music or to media or to journalism or any other subject. So I'm really optimistic because I think the next generation is, in good hands. Now, there are social institutions and other forces that are going to confound things. I talk about this a lot with my colleagues. You look at where the money is right now, and the money is hugely in AI industry, like NVIDIA, a $2 trillion company practically overnight. Microsoft overtaking Apple, becoming the $3 trillion company because of AI and its investments in that arena. So, there's huge power in those kind of resources. So, it's not just a simple thing where you can say, okay, students are going to grow up and be the great leaders and they're going to transform society. They're up against huge hurdles, but I'm still optimistic because I think they're not going to give up. And eventually they'll be the people leading those companies. So I think, there is hope, not hopeless.
No, certainly. John, Alex Zidane, who used to work on News 12 New Jersey, not sure if you ever followed him or watched him on Power and Politics on that show. Great journalist. He's running for U.S. Senate now. And, what's really, I think, the core of his campaign is like, listen, I've been holding people in power accountable for years. I've been asking the tough questions. I've been looking to hold those accountable in Trenton or, anyone else that he interviews that works in government. Do you think that that's something, maybe a trend in the future where more and more journalists will want to perhaps seek public office? Is that something maybe that interests you? I mean, maybe being an assemblyman, state senator. I mean, again, someone like Alex Zidane who's running for U.S. Senate, again, he's looking at it like, well, I've held governors accountable. I've talked to Senate candidates, senators, and I've asked the tough questions. And that's why I'm, I think I'm as good as anybody to run and hopefully try to win this Senate seat because I've been that guy. I've been holding people accountable. Do you see more and more journalists maybe going down that road and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I can seek public office. Is that something maybe does that even interest you?
Well, I am not going to pursue that because I have so many other things that I'm already committed to in terms of public service and other things. But I agree with you that journalists would make great leaders and they could become that. And there are historic examples. I'm not saying he's a journalist, but he was certainly a newspaper man, William Randolph Hearst, became a great political figure. And so there are precedents. And so I think that journalists could be great leaders in terms of that, arena. But, if they want to stick with doing journalism, that's a noble calling as well.
So no Congressman Pavlik or State Senator Pavlik in the future anytime?
Well, not John V. Pavlik. Maybe there's another Pavlik out there.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. All right. Listen, I got to ask the question, I got to try to probe a little bit. But folks, he's John Pavlik, distinguished professor of media at Rutgers University, the School of Communication. Once again, you can check out the website, www.com, that's COMM, info.rutgers.edu for more information about their undergraduate and graduate programs, one of the best ones in the state. Obviously, it's at my alma mater, Rutgers University. John, any big events coming up at the School of Communication Information coming up in 2024?
We have a big event this Wednesday, actually. We're doing an incubator on innovation and research. So that's just this Wednesday the 6th.
Okay. Anything else for the rest of the semester or later in the summer or fall?
Well, May 2nd, we're doing a big event on labor and journalism, and I'm hosting the afternoon panel on AI and labor in journalism. What are the implications of AI for that? That'll be May 2nd at Rutgers.
Well, if you ever need panelists,
there'll be a link on our website.
If you ever need panelists, some guys available in Hudson County, just
thank you.
Just let you know if you ever need panelists there, sir. But John, thank you for your time. Again, you're a wealth of information, man. I appreciate you coming on the show and really, again, trusting Jersey First TV and really, I think, helping to shape young minds and really getting people, I think, to think positively about media and journalism in a time where that's probably not the case. You're doing a good job in changing that mindset with the students, obviously, you're dealing with on a daily basis. So I thank you for your time. Have a great rest of the spring semester. Folks, once again, he's John Pavlik, media professor at Rutgers University in New Brunswick at the School of Communication and Information, our guest tonight here on Real Talk. John, God bless you, man. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night. Folks, good stuff there. John Pavlik there, distinguished professor at Rutgers University. Good stuff with him. And again, I can't say enough about if you are looking to get into journalism, whether in an undergraduate or graduate program. Again, listen, I'm a little biased. Okay, multiple graduate degrees from Rutgers University. Yeah, I'm a little, can't help it. I want to be a little partisan here. Go to Rutgers, and it's money well spent there at the State University. For sure. Folks, again, if you just joined us right now, it's 7:54 here on the East Coast. Again, don't go anywhere. We got plenty still to go on the program. So again, click that share button because sharing is caring here on Jersey First TV. Folks, I can't say enough really about the just the quality of guests that this program continues to produce here. And again, this is why the program does well. Traffic-wise, it's about having engaging conversations. It's about stimulating your minds, folks. All right, I'm not just here to look pretty on the air. I'm here to help provoke good conversation, thoughtful conversation, and engaging dialogue here on the program. But folks, before we call it a night, you know what time it is. It's time for final thoughts. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, today, obviously, for those political junkies out there that read Politico, the Supreme Court earlier today, and I'll read just sort of the logistics here. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously, by the way, that states do not have the authority to kick the 45th president off of any ballot. Okay. Now, the Supreme Court said, again, states have no authority to remove Donald Trump from the 2024 presidential ballot. Again, the unanimous decision, short-circuiting efforts by his detractors to declare him disqualified over his role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Right? Now, the justices did not weigh in on the fraught question of whether Trump engaged in insurrection by attempting to subvert the 2020 election results or stoking the violence on January 6th, which is, folks, we all know that's not true. Okay. And I know there are plenty of liberal journalists in New Jersey that would call the 45th president insurrectionists. We all know who they are. Matt Friedman, David Cruz, Tom Moran, Charles Stile, Alan Steinberg, Jay Lasseter, Max Pizarro, Terrence McDonald, all the rest of the clowns. More on them later. All right. But that's not the case. Okay. If it was as overt as they make it out to be, again, all the aforementioned legal scholars that I just, listed, obviously, then that would have been the case. That's not. Okay. But regardless. Right. And again, a lot of the detractors and a lot of the people looking to keep him off the ballot were trying to say that, hey, they could disqualify a presidential candidate under the Constitution's, quote, insurrection clause. That's not the case. Okay. Now, the justice's decision overturns a Colorado ruling that would have removed Donald Trump from the ballot in that state. Now, the decision spells doom for a plethora of other state-level challenges to Trump's qualification under, again, a very liberal interpretation of the 14th Amendment clause that says that those who engage in, quote, an insurrection after taking an oath to support the Constitution are ineligible to hold office again. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I had the privilege of being there on January 20th in 2017 when Donald Trump took the oath of office as the 45th president. And again, what he's done and what he did in his 4 years was exactly that, uphold the Constitution. The idea that, again, and we have all the liberal detractors, we have all of the woke mob and all progressives and leftists that will scream to high heavens about whether or not the 45th president, and that they're convinced that the 45th president engaged in insurrection. Folks, I think we all know now. We've read the transcript of his speech. We've seen what's happened. In many instances, it was almost a guided tour by some Capitol police officers to some of those that broke into the Capitol building. And again, let me be very clear. I'm not condoning what happened. I'm not condoning breaking into any government building. But be very careful about what you want to be sanctimonious about, folks, about breaching Capitol grounds, right? Or trying to, camp out in front of the Supreme Court or in the lobby of the Supreme Court, because, again, there are women in the country who think that we're living in the times of the Handmaid's Tale, and that somehow, women are going to be regressed back to the days prior to the 19th Amendment. That's not the case. Right? Or leftists camping out and being in state capitol building. Didn't we see that in Wisconsin and other states right over the years? So be careful about when you want to talk about what's insurrection and breaking into a Capitol building and this and that. Let's be careful. Let's get back to the bigger issue here. Two things. Okay. Number one, it was a unanimous decision. Okay. Which tells you that the three, again, liberal justices, okay, Ketanji Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor, okay, clearly didn't see the evidence that, again, many at CNN, MSNBC, the Star Ledger, and J Spotlight News, Insider NJ, the New Jersey Monitor, the Bergen Record, okay, all these left-leaning news sites would have you believe that somehow the evidence is overwhelming for the Supreme Court to side with the lower courts, and that's not the case. Okay, so that just tells you right there that the argument already on its face value was flawed. And the Supreme Court ruled accordingly. Now, of course, there are going to be people that are going to, for example, the Rebovich Institute at Rider University. I mean, look, you want to talk about garbage in New Jersey, okay? Putting out their nonsense on Twitter today. Whether or not Justice Thomas should have recused himself. Okay, well, that would have still made it an 8-0 decision. Really? I mean, it's semantics at this point. Okay? It was a 9-0 unanimous decision. It wasn't like 5-4. It wasn't like, the controversy of Bush v. Gore in 2000 about that election and whether or not to recount this or recount. No, folks, it wasn't like a slim decision. It was a unanimous decision because the justices today, and if you read a little bit more about the decision, it's a pretty lengthy one. Again, if you have some time, read about it. It's a pretty interesting PDF. I started reading it a little bit earlier today. Supreme Court didn't want to sort of go down that slippery slope because now creating that precedent, who's to say a Democrat candidate would be subjected to that? Okay? Only Congress, again, can remove a candidate from a ballot, not the states. Okay? So bravo to the Supreme Court on that ruling. And we all know that legal scholars on the left are up in arms today. They're blown a load on themselves in the outrage about what happened. Folks, if your ideas on the left are so foolproof, and you think that the president of the United States is doing such a great job, which, folks, let's be honest, this Thursday, I'm going to laugh seeing sleepy Joe Biden, who, by the way, the State of the Union's at 9 o'clock Eastern time. How much Adderall do we have to feed Joe Biden just to keep him awake? To address Congress through the State of the Union, to address what state of our union, how bad it is, about inflation still being a serious problem, gas prices, interest rates, our borders wide open, right? We're funneling money to corrupt regimes like Ukraine, okay? And President Zelensky, that clown over there, or we're sending money overseas to foreign campaigns when, quite frankly, that money should be spent here to help our veterans, to help the elderly. Okay? But sure, listen, hey, as long as, there's a lesbian in every cabinet position, as long as we're making sure trans people are being employed at the Pentagon, okay? As long as we're not misgendering anybody and we're making sure that pronouns are emphasized in our email signatures and that we're seeing pronouns emphasized in job descriptions. Folks, the state of our union's a mess. Okay. And if you're such a proponent of Joe Biden and you're such a supporter and think that Joe Biden has done such a good job, then it should be easy to beat Donald Trump in November. But here's a spoiler, folks. Anyone who leans left, progressives, the woke mob, whoever, the alphabet army, take your pick. They're worried because they see the state of the country. They see the fact that over 7 million illegals have been crossing the border, okay, and are here illegally in this country. They're overcrowding our schools. They're using up our social services, okay? They're destroying our quality of life in this country, okay, because the border isn't being addressed, okay? But Thursday night, the president will tell you how great our union is. It's not. And if you're so convinced your ideas are better, then keep Donald Trump on the ballot and beat him in November. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, the 45th president can win this one. and defeat Joe Biden, because there isn't one metric whatsoever, folks, that will tell you that the president of the United States currently is doing a good job. He doesn't deserve 4 years. He doesn't deserve 4 months. He doesn't deserve 4 minutes of a re-election. And if you're being intellectually honest, again, let's take emotion out of it. Okay? Go up to your average Joe Biden supporter. What exactly has Joe Biden done correctly in 4 years so far? And as soon as you hear the answer, well, he's not Trump. That's not what I asked you. What exactly has Joe Biden done to make your life better? Right? Didn't Ronald Reagan ask that during the 1980 debate, right? When he debated Jimmy Carter in 1980. I remember watching the replay of that. He simply asked, is your life better off 4 years later with Joe Biden? Folks, if you're being intellectually honest, the answer is no. Now, do I have concerns about the 45th president? Of course. His lack of decorum, the lack of a filter. I get all that stuff. But folks, there's no denying between 2017 to 2021 about gas prices, interest rates, border security. Our cities are not a mess. Okay, we were not involved in any foreign wars. I mean, folks, the choice is clear this November. And the choice is clear that if he's such an easy guy to beat because his policies are flawed, then beat him at the ballot box. Okay? See, many on the left are all concerned about democracy. And we have to vote for Joe Biden because if we don't, we might lose our democracy. Folks, the minute you want to keep people off a ballot, that's when you lose in democracy. So to all my liberal friends in the media here in New Jersey, because let's be honest, folks, okay? Let's be honest. We all know who they are. And I know that right now, the U.S. Senate primary in the Democrat Party is sort of like consuming the news feed right now in New Jersey. Okay, but give it a few days after these county conventions come and go. I promise you that these 8 clowns behind me, Terrence McDonald, Jay Lasseter, Alan Steinberg, okay, David Cruz, Tom Moran, Charles Stile, Max Pizarro, Matt Friedman, I guarantee you at some point during the next few days, whether it's on their social media or those writing columns, like Tommy Boy, Tom Moran, and his usual, Trump derangement syndrome, Chucky, Charles Stile with his usual Trump derangement syndrome, Alan Steinberg again. And it's interesting because people are so concerned about Joe Biden's age. Is anyone concerned about Alan Steinberg? He's like 99 years old. How's this guy still allowed to write columns? Like, doesn't that concern anybody? It concerns me. Okay. Or Tom Moran, who's like 87, right? Or Jay Lashley, who's like 76 years old. Or Charles Stile, that's like 91. Or David Cruz, that's like almost 80. You look at him. Like, folks, I get Joe Biden's age concerns you. The age of these guys should concern you too. Because I bet you for the next week, all they're going to talk about is how wrong the Supreme Court was. Again, these legal scholars behind me will attempt to lecture you about how wrong the Supreme Court was. Right? Because they're subverting democracy. No, guys, we want to keep a guy off a ballot. That's the first step to subverting democracy. And again, have a little, that force of the board. Wait for it. Integrity. I know it's hard for you guys to have some because you don't have any. But again, if you want to start bitching and moaning about democracy and subverting democracy, start with the fact that you want to keep someone off a ballot. Yeah, do we want to start setting that precedent? Of course not. So bravo to the Supreme Court for doing that earlier today. Because again, the last thing you want to do is set a precedent about letting the states keeping people off ballots. That's the federal government's job. It's written in the Constitution, folks. Okay? Only Congress can do that. I feel like I'm teaching a history class here. Okay? Guys, do some simple reading. It's not that hard. Okay? So again, bravo to the Supreme Court, and even bravo to the 3 liberal justices who even they knew that even if they wanted to dissent, they couldn't because, folks, it doesn't make sense. Okay? The law is very clear. Okay? The 45th president didn't engage in any insurrection. The 45th president didn't do any of that stuff. That's what CNN wants you to believe. That's what MSNBC wants you to believe. That's what Insider NJ and NJ Spotlight News and NJ, the New Jersey Monitor and NorthJersey.com and the Star Ledger, okay? That's what they want you to believe. Political New Jersey, that's what they want you to believe. But folks, There's something called facts. There's something called truth. And I know that they struggle with that. But folks, clearly, the Supreme Court didn't. So bravo to them. Again, you don't have to like it, folks, but again, you want to talk about democracy and how to preserve it? Today, democracy was preserved. You should embrace that instead of denouncing it. Folks, also, before I want to call it out here, I want to wish, again, happy Women's History Month. I know coming up on March 8th is International Women's Day. I'd like to have a little fun on the show here. Okay. Shout out to my mom, my aunt, my sunshine, my BFF, my bestie, all the important women in my life. Okay. And to everybody out there, all the women that you consider important in your life as well. Again, happy Women's History Month. We'll have a little fun throughout the month of March, of course, on this, but, laugh a little bit. It's not that serious. But since I'm commemorating Women's History Month and applauding women, let me just send a shout out to some of the women I know in New Jersey media, right? So when I think of women, of course, I think of Jay Lassiter. So happy Women's History Month, Jay. Again, it's your month, and certainly, I could say some other things on the air, but I think I'll be nice today. But again, to all the women out there like Jay Lassiter and others, happy Women's History Month. Folks, also, again, before I call it a night here, I want to thank you all. Great month of February. Over 18,000 organic views on the show. As a matter of fact, I just looked at the numbers today. We're actually at 19,000 for the month of February. And again, this number wouldn't be possible without all of you that make it a point to tune in every Monday night, to share the replays, to opine and comment. This is why this show continues to do well. Okay? As we approach, again, year 3 later this June with Jersey First TV. And I cannot thank, again, Rosemary Becky enough, the president and CEO of Jersey First TV, or Ashley Smith, executive director, okay, who are a privilege to work with. And I know I give them some headaches sometimes, and I apologize. Ladies, I love you, okay? But again, without their support in my abilities and their confidence in my abilities, this show wouldn't be possible. And without all of you, my family, my friends, colleagues, frenemies, haters, again, you're still tuning in for a reason. And I thank you all for doing it. Folks, again, always remember here on this program, and I say it consistently, here at Jersey First TV, we are proud to stand up to Jewish hate. We're seeing it at our institutions, whether it's our college campuses and universities, whether it's our media institutions, whether we see it in activism. Folks, be better. Don't let jihadists in our news media, on our college campuses, in our institutions, don't let jihadists hijack the narrative. Okay? Now more than ever, it's important to stand up to Jewish hate. I'm proud to do that on this show, and I know also Jersey First TV is proud to stand up to Jewish hate. Folks, that's our show for this week. Once again, I want to thank John Pavlik, Distinguished Professor of Media at the School of Communication and Information at Rutgers University, my alma mater. Again, shout out to them and the good job John Pavlik is doing. Again, always love talking to him. Folks, again, sharing is caring. Click that share button, of course, and you can tell everybody you know how much you enjoy Real Talk right here on Jersey First TV. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, folks. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Of course, for everyone that loves YouTube, click the subscribe button and you'll be automatically notified of all the great content brought to you every single week by Jersey First TV. And of course, whether you get your podcasts on Spotify or SoundCloud, download Jersey First and take it with you. Hey, visiting your in-laws, walking the dog, the weather's getting warmer, maybe you're going for that run. You have your you have your smartphone with you. You're listening to music. You're listening to podcasts. Hey, you won't go wrong listening to Jersey First TV. And folks, I can't say enough how proud I am to be on the dream team of Garnet State Media. That's right, folks. It is Jersey First TV, always educating and advocating for the residents of New Jersey. Brand new episodes of the Nader Narrative premiere every Thursday, hosted by Elizabeth Nader. Of course, brand new episodes of Bridging the Gap with AJ Malillo and Sima Rambolo premiere every Thursday. Also, folks, check out their latest episode, exclusive interview with U.S. Representative Tom Kean out of the 7th Congressional District here in New Jersey. Good interview by them, certainly. And folks, you can check out Real Talk every Monday night right here. Check your local listings of when it airs live every Monday night right here on Jersey First TV. Folks, always remember it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid. It's always real talk right here with Jersey First TV. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, Top 50 Latino, as voted on by the Latino Spirit Online magazine, along with the United States Latino Affairs Initiative, and certainly, ladies and gentlemen, now more than ever, I'll continue to be the weapon of mass disruption because my level of honesty is truly necessary in this era of journalistic deception. Yes, it's me, Fernando, your Uribe. Once again, folks, thank you so much for joining us here. Again, please party responsibly. Again, don't forget to change your clocks coming up soon. Again, spring forward, daylight savings time. Again, it's sunset at 8 o'clock. I'm looking forward to that. Warmer days are soon coming up, and I'm looking forward to that, as I'm sure all of you are as well. Folks, again, you can't be good, be bad, baby. Don't forget, again, check us out every single week here on Jersey First TV. I'll see you next Monday night here, the latest edition of Real Talk via Jersey First TV. Folks, have a great rest of your week, and thanks for stopping by.